It's Melissa from Kiwi Banana, and today I wanted to record a video about eating vegan food and living, traveling, visiting, whatever you like to call it, the Philippines. And the reason I really wanted to do this video is that it was possibly one of the hardest countries I visited to eat vegan. Not that it can't be done, don't get me wrong, it can definitely be done, but there were a number of reasons as to why that became a little bit more difficult than it should be when I was traveling the Philippines. Now, I guess one of the main reasons is their concept around social harmony and their desire to be part of a group and to be accepted by the group, and they really care what others think. So if you're to go and do something that's quite different, quite, I guess, outside the box, maybe a bit against the grain of what everyone else is doing around you, you would be embarrassed generally, as if you're a Filipino and you've been brought up in that culture. I'm not saying that that is the case for everybody, but that is a general thing within their culture. Now, a lot of their food is influenced by Chinese and American and Spanish and some other Asian countries as well. And so a lot of their cuisines have been altered slightly, and sort of the idea originates from some of those other countries. And so that also means that they have possibly, I guess, lost the way in way that they may have used to eat, maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe 2,000 years ago, maybe what they ate back then was very different to how they eat today. They also have an idea around, and this is very similar to some Chinese culture as well, in that eating meat is seen as a sign of prosperity, a sign of monetary richness. And eating vegetables in the Philippines is seen as a sign of poverty, and they would generally take pity on you as being a poor person if you were to eat a lot of vegetables. And then also, on top of all of that, there's also, shall I say, the big influence of Christianity, which adds another element to, I guess, make it a bit harder for someone to eat vegan in the Philippines. Now, there's also other reasons as to why that can be a little bit more difficult, and that is that they don't really know what vegetarian is, let alone what vegan is, and they'll even sometimes classify fish and chicken as being vegetarian. I shouldn't laugh, but yes, they really don't have much of an idea what vegetarian is. A lot of the times when I'm asking what was inside dishes, they were not able to tell me what the ingredients were. And sometimes if they even tell you that, yes, they do know what vegan is, they can be lying. I was at a place that I thought was reasonably touristy, so I made the assumption that they would probably know what vegan is, because it was being a touristy area. They might know what vegan is. And I said, okay, do you know what vegan is? And the person was like, yeah. And I was like, great. Can you please tell me what on this menu is vegan or can be made vegan easily? And she's like, oh, yeah. And she pointed to the chicken and pig carbonara dish. And I looked at her and I looked at the menu and said, oh, so this can be made vegan? Like we can take things out of it, and like, would it just be, I guess, pasta and a bit of parsley with no sauce, and no vegetables, maybe, I don't know, grilled mushrooms or something? And she just kind of looked at me funny, and I was like, oh, she actually doesn't know what vegan is. So yeah, and also, I guess to put a spin on that, they just generally don't care. I went on a couple of boat tours, and before I'd go, I would try and reassure, do you know what vegan is? Can you provide some food for me? Blah, blah, blah. And they'd say, yeah. And then I would get to, would be eating lunch, and it would be, the only thing I could eat was rice and fruit. Which is, it's, don't get me wrong, that's great, but it would have been nice to have maybe another vegetable dish there, And at one point I was like to the guy, I was like, oh, so where's the vegetables? And he pointed to a noodle dish, and I was like, oh, great. And I said, oh, it's vegan? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, but what about that? And I pointed to some flesh on there. He's like, yeah, it's chicken. I was like, that's not vegan. Vegans don't eat animals. And he was like, oh, well, it's fish. And I was like, fish is not a plant. And it was just a really bizarre moment. Anyway, you can cook at home, or at, where you're staying. That is a possibility. However, having a kitchen and using kitchen facilities, it can be quite a privilege there as well. And quite often we'd have to pay to use the kitchen even when we're staying in an accommodation. Not all the time, but sometimes. At one place we had to pay up to 200 pesos per kitchen use. So it was quite a lot. And then they even charged 50 pesos for rice cooker use. So it was quite expensive, and we ended up in a place that was quite far away from anywhere. So we won't be doing that again. So yeah, so that, generally I'll just be like, fine, if I can't buy food out, I'll just cook and I'll take it in a container and it's no problem. But it's, it started to get a little bit expensive when you're staying in a place like that one where you had to pay quite a lot of money to use the kitchen each time you had to cook. And I guess what I want to say is that I find that maybe the Filipino culture eats maybe a bit too many animals, to put politely. They eat a lot of animals, and if you've ever met someone from the Philippines and maybe they're visiting where you live, or they live where you live, you will probably notice that they eat almost any animal there ever is. They don't seem to care about it at all. And that can, that is basically, I guess, all of those reasons are what I would consider the reason why it can be harder to eat in the Philippines. Now, you can definitely find vegan food in some of the touristy places. And, and you can get, you can buy fruits and vegetables, and there's grains, and sometimes you can get beans as well. So that can, you can have some pretty healthy stuff if you can cook for yourself, or you just want to eat fruit. Fruit can sometimes be expensive, especially if you're in a touristy area or in an area that maybe they don't actually grow a lot of fruit. So that can get expensive, or they're just trying to rip you off because they want to charge you as much as they can. So that can happen as well. But, I did find a few nice vegan joints in some of the cities. They were sort of touristy places. Some of them were quite expensive, but you can occasionally find some cheap ones, and it's pretty good when you can. There were a few times where I'd go to places and I might just order rice, and then I would buy some fruit from maybe a stall down the road, or I would go through the various dishes that had vegetables in them and didn't look like they had any meat in them, and go through the list of absolutely any animal product that I thought that could possibly be in there whatsoever. And so yeah, that was a process sometimes. But yeah, that is my rundown on vegan food in the Philippines. I'm not doing this to deter you from going there. It's more just to make sure that you are aware, and that you can be as prepared as you possibly can for when you venture there. It is a reasonably poor place in a lot of parts, and I was expecting there to be a lot more vegetable dishes available, but I was a little bit disappointed in that regards. Anyway, that is my video about eating vegan food in the Philippines. Before I go, I should mention that I was in areas of Manila, Cebu Island, Bohol Island, Siquijor Island, and Palawan Island. Of course, I have not explored all of the islands in the Philippines. There is a lot of islands to explore. Maybe you know of some really good locations in the Philippines where you can eat vegan food. And if you do, leave that in the comment section down below so we can all know about it for our next trip to the Philippines, or for anyone's next trip to the Philippines, should I say.